Hello and welcome to the Mayhem.
When you're walking and talking and freaking and yelling and busting and speaking and looking at a boy, no one tell us what to do with your high top shoes and your wavy toes with the black shorts, so no damn get away. Don't think they can play and nail up to the wall, cause you really need to stay. Gotta go straight, they back out, bring me my right brand, turbo jacket. He's ready to roll. When you're walking and talking, but he's faster than me. Shout my walkie-talkie man.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to Mayhem Mondays. Welcome to this now episode 3, where we do our reactions and overreactions to the weeks of football. We're gonna get a taste of real football starting next week, and I am very, 2 weeks from now. Sorry, excuse me, I'm getting ahead of myself already. But man, I am just so excited. It's basically like a week and a half. God. Anyways, before we begin, as always, we got the glow up. It's official. Fantasyfootballadvice.network is the new site where you're going to want to go. And man, it just looks clean. It runs so smooth now. It's amazing. And what's awesome is you can actually go in and explore for free right now. And you can like sign up and everything, check it out and like really like make sure like everything is like what I'm saying. And you'll see like there's trade calculator, player rankings, league classifieds. You'll see all my articles are exclusively posted in there, as well as I upload videos in there from the channel that you will always have access to on the YouTube. But it's just really fantastic. There's other content creators in there doing awesome stuff too. So this is the time, like if there was ever a time, like now is the time, because it's only on the come up and it's only going to get better. So please go sign up right now. We're going to start just with some preseason takeaways. I mean, we're going to get through these as fast as humanly possible at this point, because I think everyone is just sick about talking about the preseason. We're just ready for some regular season football at this point. So we're just going to, like I said, blow through these. Steelers, Falcons, 24-0 for the Steelers. Oh, yeah, home team. I think we're just all too low on Kenny Pickett, especially like in dynasty leagues and Superflex. Like if you are drafting still, you're going to want to take a shot on him late, because I think he's going to definitely pay off at ADP. And then I also think that like in dynasty leagues, you should go and make a mid to low offer, because I don't feel like unless they're a really they're a Steelers fan, for the most part, I don't think the Kenny Pickett manager in dynasty is like steadfast on holding him. And I think you could probably get him at a discount before he actually breaks out. And if he has like a decent season this year, probably the next year you would expect it to just keep on rising. And if he's able to maintain that job through 3 to 5 years, then now you're setting up potential he could maybe be like a full-on dynasty quarterback. Number 2 for me, Najee, take a line from Pat McAfee. He's running through big gaping holes.
Harris takes the handoff up the middle through a big hole again. He's got the first down.
I think you got to be honest. I mean, you watched his gaping hole here, and he just overruns it. And that's Jalen Hawkins right there.
And you're probably thinking like, oh, Jack, that was only an 8 to 10 yard run. Jalen Warren would have popped that for a touchdown. Give me a break. The Jalen Warren stuff is absolutely adorable, but fetch is not going to happen. Stop trying to make it happen. Najee has a clear hold on this backfield. Coach Tomlin loves Najee like a second son, I think. So it's going to be a 70-30 split. I mean, they're not going to give him 500 carries. Jalen Warren will be involved, and that's good for our football team, but I don't think it's going to be necessarily great for your fantasy team, especially if you're trying to like start Jalen Warren in a viable way while Najee Harris is also healthy. It's like at that point, you're going to be hoping that Warren pops a touchdown, because if he doesn't, then probably not going to do great for your fantasy lineup. And then my number 3 takeaway, I'm calling it right now. Steelers are winning the AFC North. And I know it's the homer pick. Maybe it is the homerism in me, but I'm sold on the offense at this point. Like I'm watching Kenny Pickett drop moon dime shots into the lap of Deontay Johnson, and then go on the opposite side of the field and do the same thing to George Pickens for a touchdown. I think Pickens, Freiermuth present as good to great red zone options. Deontay Johnson is a clear main PPR target. And then the running game, obviously, if you combine Najee Harris and Jaylen Warren, they both have pass catching ability. They both have the ability to take screen passes into the red zone, which will only benefit Kenny Pickett. I think last year we saw the growing pains. And also, look, I live in Canada. I live in Quebec, Canada. Mota di tabarnak. You understand? I kind of live under a rock up here. I don't always have full access to college football the way that maybe a lot of other people do, and the way that maybe I should invest in seeking out more. But I knew Kenny Pickett had a little bit of mobility, but I think he's got some decent wheels. He had one scramble in the preseason that really surprised me. And so if you were to add in 3 to 5 rushing touchdowns and 25 passing touchdowns, which I think is a reasonable target for him to attain, Kenny Pickett's going to be a viable fantasy quarterback. He's going to be able to support, the combination of 2 wide receivers and a tight end, I believe. And it's a relatively focused passing attack in that aspect, but it's 3 guys that are, good to great. I think, again, I understand this is a lot of homerism coming out, but Pat Freiermuth, Deontay Johnson, and George Pickens present as a 3-headed monster that I think is legitimate as an NFL offense. And, it's you can see some regression from the Bengals. The Ravens are definitely in the mix. I think it's going to be super tight, but I'm just going to go with my team. I'm going to go with Coach Tomlin, who's never been under 500. And I think he'll just kind of manage to get us there and and I really think it's going to be on the back of Najee Harris is going to push for a number 1 season. I don't know that he's necessarily going to finish as the number 1 running back, but I have him finishing top 5 this year. And I would say even pushing for top 3. To me, it's going to be CMC and Eckler because of the passing. And then right there with them, it's going to be Nick Chubb and Najee Harris, and Derrick Henry. I feel like those are the guys that are in the mix. Everyone else, Jacobs is coming back, but the offense the Raiders have looked a lot better. However, the history is unkind to running backs that played through injuries and had 400 touches into the next year. Again, there's a lot of moving parts with obviously the situation in Indianapolis and Jonathan Taylor, and Breece Hall's coming back from injury, so is Javonte Williams. There's a lot of, I feel like almost all the other backfields in some way almost kind of have moving pieces, but I see that top 5 as being, it's clear to me. Moving on, because I spent a lot of time on Steelers Falcons. Forgive me, I'm just, it's my home team. What do you want me to do? And I'm not from Pittsburgh, but I will tell you that in Ontario, which is where I'm from, there's actually a large swath of Pittsburgh Steelers fans. It's a known thing that Ontario, for some reason, I think we just kind of vibe with the aesthetic and, the representation of that blue collar, tough natured aura. We vibe with the Steelers that way. And especially in Northern Ontario too, I feel like there's a lot of Steelers fans, and, my dad was a Steelers fan his whole life. And so I grew up a Steelers fan because of that. So, even though I'm not from Pittsburgh, that's why for me, it's my home team. So moving on here, because I'm still talking about the Steelers and I wanted to be able to blow through this quick. So we'll have to get through these Next one's pretty fast. Luckily, there were a lot of third stringers in. So, like, Colts, Eagles, 27 for the Colts, 13 Eagles. Anthony Richardson, kind of an ugly game passing, 6 for 17, 78 yards. That's not going to get it done on an NFL level. And then, but 5 for 38 on the ground. And that's going to be typical. I expect growing pains. We'll see some explosive plays here and there through the passing game, but definitely I think we're going to see a lot of ugliness. And we're going to see a lot of amazing stuff on the ground. Evan Hull, Deion Jackson, both have to be stashed right now because of the situation with Jonathan Taylor. That seems obvious. I would prioritize actually Hull over Deion Jackson, even though Jackson may start as like the official starter. But honestly, like I might just be out on both of them, depending on how they split carries. If Jonathan Taylor's like traded or not available, I don't necessarily see myself buying in on Evan Hull and Deion Jackson. So, if you haven't done your draft, you're gonna take a late shot on them, that's fine. But otherwise, like I'm not that into it. And then, shout out to Gardner Minshew. Again, I know Anthony Richardson's going to be the starter, but like in terms of like the passing game, Minshew clearly outperformed him. Honestly, like I know Richardson's supposed to be the future, but it may not have been such a bad idea for them to perhaps slow roll it a little more with Richardson. I understand why they're going with it week 1, but Minshew's a competent quarterback, and I feel like he's never really truly gotten a shot. And if you were just going to give Minshew the reins for 1 year and just be like, hey, what happens, happens. And Richardson's our future, and we're gonna like have him be like a true red shirt. I would understand that, but again, I think I'm just partial to mustache mania.
Hey, baby.
Next up, Lions, Panthers. Lions 26, Panthers 17. Look, I've been pounding the table all offseason for Adam Thielen. I get it. We want to put these old wide receivers out to pasture. He's 32. He can't possibly produce in the NFL, except he's going to. He's definitely going to. He's the number 1 wide receiver on that team. It's so clear to me. Bryce Young is targeting him heavily, and especially is targeting him on third down and red zone. In the preseason game, there was the touchdown. The touchdown is overlooking the fact that Thielen went 4 for 48 and a touchdown on 5 targets in a preseason game where he didn't play the whole game. What do you think is going to happen through the first 4 weeks? Like Bryce Young's going to be looking for a veteran target, and the other guys are going to pop here and there. I feel like it's going to be like 1 week it'll be DJ Chark, 1 week it'll be Laviska Shenault, 1 week it'll be Jonathan Mingo. But the one guy that's going to be consistent on the other side of it, it's going to be Adam Thielen. Like just every week, it's going to be like between 4 to 8 receptions, 40 to 80 yards, and probably a touchdown. If you get that touchdown 10 weeks out of 16, like you're laughing. And I'm not even necessarily trying to hold him that long. Like if I can draft Adam Thielen, watch him in the last round of my draft. Like if I draft him in like round 15 and then suddenly he pops for 3-4 weeks, even 3 out of 4 weeks, and I can then turn to someone and say, hey, I was right about Adam Thielen. Look what's happening in Carolina. Let me package him with X player, Y player, whatever it is, and maybe make a trade happen there. It's not, I like to play in increments of about 3-4 weeks. So in this early part of the season, and when you're getting to the end part of your draft, that like last double digits, like obviously draft for talent in the first half, but when you get to the double digit rounds, that's where you want to kind of, yes, take shots on guys, but you also want to be smart about how you set up the first 3 to 4 weeks of your season. So if there's advantages that you can find, like an Adam Thielen, who maybe is not going to be viable for an entire season, but is clearly producing with some juice, being on a new team, being kind of overlooked, being the veteran on the team. All the other wide receivers are relatively young. DJ Chark on his third team in 3 years, like, taking advantage of something like that, taking advantage of Washington Commanders, who are going to be playing the Arizona Cardinals week 1. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But moving on, Bryce Young looked better. And then shout out to Teddy Bridgewater, who, it's just nice, with everything that Teddy B went through. It's just nice to see him like still able to perform on an NFL level. Patriots 7, Titans 23. Look, I'm not buying into Tyjae Spears. I think he's a nice player. Similar to the whole Jaylen Warren thing, he's not a threat to Derrick Henry, like, whatsoever. And if you think he is, this is like, I don't understand how, like, what okay. I can conceive of like of always trying to find the next guy, before everybody else, being like, I know Tyjae Spears is gonna, take over from Derrick Henry, and it's like, yeah, when you just do that all the time and you're constantly betting on the outliers are outliers for a reason. So it's like 70 to 80% of the time you're gonna be wrong. So it's like, what are you doing? You bet on the fact that Derrick Henry is a freak athlete, that he, performed last year with like no help, and now he's got DeAndre Hopkins, and if Treylon Burks can get healthy and Chigo Okonkwo can, have the breakout that people are expecting, now you've got a real offense around him. You can't just stack the box 20 to 40% of the game. What are we doing here? Derrick Henry smash picked this year. Like, and again, it's like certain guys are just freak athletes where I feel like they're just going to outperform the age factor. Like if Adrian Peterson, and it's unfortunate, I don't want to get in the whole situation of like what happened with him and his child, but the fact was that he was suspended for a year. If he had not been suspended for that year, he would have dominated that year, probably would have stayed with the Vikings, and probably would have dominated at age 31, age 32. Like, right? What are we doing? Anyways, I'm out on the Patriots in general too. Just like there's not any pieces that I like here. Ramondre Stevenson is a good player, but just Bellatrix. Like he's gonna Zeke and whoever else. Pierce Strong will have a game that'll annoy everybody. You just know it's going to happen, and I'm not buying in at the ADP that Ramondre Stevenson is going at. I don't think I have any shares of him. I know I don't in any of like my regular leagues in terms of like Dynasty Superflex or anything that I'm doing on Sleeper, and I have limited best ball shares. And then the other thing is, Malik Willis is a nice backup, but he had 200 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. So like, let's not act like he's replacing Ryan Tannehill tomorrow, and I could still see a future for Will Levis. It's hard to make the leap at the NFL at any position, let alone quarterback, and it's like it gets so overlooked, and it's like Malik Willis was trash last year, and he's a bust, and now this year he's a valuable backup because like, oh yeah, it turns out when you get experience and you learn, like you tend to get better at your job for the most part. And then moving again, we're just gonna blow right through these because it was a lot of like third stringers. Excuse me. Took a bong toke right before this. Just struggling. All right. Chargers 23, 49ers 12. Trey Lance, Exodus. He is no more. It's Brock Purdy time, which is like so funny to me. But like Sam Darnold also looks decent, and so I could conceivably I've took a lot of Sam Darnold shares in Superflex leagues, really deep ones, where it was like when it's like the 25th round of a Superflex draft, and there's like literally nobody on the board even like that you're probably worth rostering. Like you're gonna end up cutting half these guys like the moment the draft is over. Yeah, I took a lot of Sam Darnold shares in those rounds. And now suddenly it's paying off for me because he elevated obviously from third string to backup, and conceivably if anything were to happen to Brock Purdy, now I've got the starting quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers and I got him for free. So it's like, that's why I was advocating for drafting Sam Darnold. And a lot of times I'm advocating for drafting these players like an Adam Thielen. Hunter Renfrow is another one that I've advocated for. And it's like, you can overlook veteran production all you want. But when it's like the last round and it's like you're taking guys on the roster bubble that may not even conceivably like make a roster and could be cut by the end of the preseason, like at that point, yeah, I would much rather have Hunter Renfrow or Adam Thielen or Sam Darnold. Like, that's it. That's where it's like, would you rather have like any of the players I just mentioned or Boston Scott? Like, come on. So the other thing was Josh Kelly had that really nice run. Elijah Dotson has had a nice preseason, but I think Josh Kelly said, hey, this is my job as the backup. Austin Eckler's obviously got a lock on that starting job, but I think we will see some more of Josh Kelly because he presents just like a big body in a different style. And so we'll see a little bit more thunder to balance the Eckler lightning, but I don't think it's going to affect Eckler in any way, shape, or form. I'm still taking Eckler extremely high in redraft. In PPR leagues, I have him second basically behind CMC. And then just shout out to Ty Davis Price. One of my dynasty teams where I drafted him, I was like, oh, that was a swing and a miss, but he's looked okay in the preseason. Every dynasty manager watching preseason games and watching their guy being like, please be a thing, please be a thing. Anyways, Seahawks, Packers, Jordan Love to Christian Watson. I drafted that in Superflex. I've drafted that a lot this year. I'm very high on the Packers. I'm very high on Jordan Love because of, history. Is not just Brett Favre and Aaron Rodgers. I've said all offseason, between Bart Starr and Brett Favre, there were, in fact, other quarterbacks for the Green Bay Packers, two that were highly successful, Lynn Dickey and Magic Man Don Majkowski. Shout out to them. Packers historically just hit on quarterbacks. Like, some teams just hit on positions. Steelers and wide receivers has always been a thing. Packers and quarterbacks is a thing. Christian Watson just he has like that physical advantage. And I think they're just like they've kind of turned into like a well-balanced offense kind of secretly, where it's like you've got Romeo Doubs as like an outside possession receiver on the other side. You've got Jaden Reed able to do some things out of the slot. You've got two very capable running backs. Suddenly we're doing things here in Green Bay. And then shout out to Adam as name of the week last week. And now we get to have a highlight from Mojo Bobo.
3rd and 3, locked to the air into the end zone. Bobo! Touchdown!
Mojo Bobo. That's my new favorite nickname, Mojo Bobo. And then number 3, Anders Carlson. Kind of had struggles earlier in the preseason. He had like an issue where he missed like 2 extra point kicks. And, he missed another one, but he nailed a 57-yarder that was just a beauty. So, shout out to him because he's got a tough job trying to replace Mason Crosby. Cardinals, Vikings. Cardinals squeaked out a win in the preseason, 18-17. Going to be one of the few wins that they squeak out because, good Lord, this is an absolute dumpster fire. And it has to be on purpose at this point because they're just trading away assets. Now there's word that Hollywood Brown is even on the trade block. Like, look, they are in full sell mode. I have 0 shares of Kyler Murray. Even in the super flex leagues where it was like in those last rounds and I'm like, oh, Kyler Murray's still there. And I'm like, he's not going to play. He's not going to play. Look, the fact that, and I shared on Twitter, I shared on X, Gannon the coach there. I feel bad for him. He's a patsy. He's Jim Tomsula. He is set up to fail. He is there as a placeholder for this year, and they're going to replace him and the quarterback next year again. And they're going to reset the franchise again, which is hilarious because they've done that like 3 times in the last they did it with Rosen, they did it with Kyler Murray, and now they're going to do it with Caleb Williams. And Caleb Williams starting to be like, maybe I won't come out. But no, it's just I think ultimately Caleb Williams will come out and is going to get drafted by the Cardinals. They're going to do everything they can to sell him on that regime. But I just, man, like they brought in Josh Dobbs, formerly of the Steelers. And, I like him. I like his story, but he was just traded there. So it's not like he's like familiar with the offensive playbook or anything. Kyler's on the PUP. Colt McCoy just got cut. Like it's Clayton Tune is going to be the starter. And I shared a video. Go check out the rest of my YouTube where he hit a defender in the back of the helmet when he was trying to make a pass downfield to his wide receiver. So I'm not exactly thrilled by the prospect of Clayton Tune starting. So much so that I think David Blau should actually be the week 1 starter. I think maybe that's why Gannon's trying to be all secretive because, I think people just forget that David Blau's even on this roster. But, shout out to the Blauhards out there. Double shout out to Mark Sessler of Around the NFL. But yeah, I wouldn't be completely shocked if it's actually David Blau that's starting for the Cardinals week 1. But if not, it's going to be Clayton Tune. And in either way, they're basically waving the white flag. I think maybe that's why they changed to those fresh white uniforms that they put on social media, because that's their white flag that they're trying to put up to the NFL saying, we have completely given up on this season. We're going to try to get 1 single win so that we are not like the 0-17 team. But other than that, we're basically banking on tanking the season and trying to get Caleb Williams and move on into the future. Next up. Oh, actually, sorry. One more thing for the Vikings. Ty Chandler didn't play. I feel like that means that he's the backup to Alexander Mattison. But if Madison were to go down, it's kind of going to be probably a mix of Ty Chandler and Dwayne McBride, and I'm not thrilled by kind of any of those prospects. So at this point, I feel like it is Alexander Mattison or bust. So you're kind of just in on Madison being like a viable starting NFL running back or not. And I haven't had that many shares of him because I feel like his ADP was a little high for me. There were just other people that I preferred, whether it was like wide receivers or other running backs, but I don't hate the pick. It wasn't one that I was necessarily trying to make. The most exciting game of this preseason week was Browns Chiefs. This one turned kind of into a barn burner. 33 for the Chiefs, 32 Browns. Browns were up like 20-3 in the first quarter, and then Chiefs came all the way back just like they do, even without Mahomes. Shout out to Justin Ross. I think we all love that story. Jerome Ford didn't play, so I think to me that means he's the backup. And Rashee Rice, had a bad game. He dropped a bad pass. Was 3 for 6 as opposed to when he was 8 for 9. So it's right back to who knows who the wide receiver is going to be for the Chiefs that you want to own. I think they're all going so late that you can just pick the one you like, take your shot. In worst case, if it doesn't work out, you drop them by week 2 or 3. And then if it does work out, awesome. Moving right along. Bills 24, Bears 21, Gabe Davis. I think the breakout's coming 1 year late. I have invested heavily in Gabe Davis. There was a play where Josh Allen, rolled to the right and then threw across his body to the left, and he was looking for Gabe Davis, and Gabe Davis caught it. And the big problem last year was that Gabe Davis's catch rate was 50%, and if he can just bump that up to like 60-65%, he's going to be money this year. Next up, DJ Moore ahead of ADP. I would take him I wrote 4th round at this. I'm so in at this point that like back of the 3rd. All right. If you're at 3-11, 3-12 in a 12 man, or, if it's a bigger league than that, 14, 16 kind of thing. But let's just stick to 12. You're at 3-11, 3-12. You're looking at the 4th round and you're thinking, I'm probably, or, I guess it's that early 4th round. Either way, like one of those two. Let's just say, like, I don't think DJ Moore is coming back to me now. I'm comfortable taking him as high as that early 4th, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. So, again, sticking to 12-man format and assuming there's no 3rd round reversal, right? So you get your 1-12 and then your 2-1, and then it goes all the way back. And then you get your 3-12, 4-1. At 3-12, 4-1, either one of those slots, I'm very comfortable taking DJ Moore. I just think he's absolutely locked and loaded to have a monster season. And then I'm not in on Damian Harris. Like, I get it that, like, he's going to vulture goal line touches. Like, look, I don't understand this like notion that an NFL running back must get 100% of his team's touchdowns or he is ineffective for fantasy. It's like if the team scores 15 rushing touchdowns, let's just say that's pretty low, and Damian Harris gets 5 of them, but James Cook gets 10 touchdowns and has like an electric 1,100 yard season, like who would you rather own? Like James Cook, right? Like, Damian Harris's best year, he had 202 carries also. I don't see him as this like crazy vulture. And then the game he had he's okay. He runs hard. I like that he's a thumper, and I think he gives them a different look in the backfield. But he went 7 for 25 and then that touchdown. So he averaged 3.6 yards per carry. If James Cook is averaging like 7 yards per carry, who would you rather have at the same 200 touches? Give me the guy getting double the yardage every touch. Next up, Jets, Giants. Jets 32, Giants 24. Look, the Jets defense is going to be a problem. Shout out to, this is like an IDP segment right here, because Quinnen Williams, I would draft like, you're going to get a value on him, but like he's definitely been a target of mine in multiple IDP drafts that I've been involved in, because I do like to target the defensive ends and linemen that get a lot of sacks, because it's a little bit easier to bank on those high spike weeks week to week when they're coming from, sack numbers that are kind of predictable in a sense, where you're like, I know Quinnen Williams is going to dominate this season. He's like the leader of that defense, and he's going to have at least double-digit sacks, and he could push to have like a legitimate, like really fantastic all-pro season. If he's able to push to 15 sacks, that's monster for IDP. So he's been a target of mine. And then his brother, Quincy Williams, got a 3-year contract coming off back-to-back 100 tackle seasons. And, I just think like the dynamic of your big brother, or I don't know if it's actually his big brother, I should look that up, but his brother, obviously Quinnen, is the leader of this team. So just by virtue of Quinnen Williams like being the leader of this team, it's like you would think that his brother, if anyone, is going to run through a wall. So yeah, and he is known as a big hitter. So, and he's had like he's not crazy with the sacks, but he had a handful of sacks. But he also had a handful of forced fumbles. So I do really like Quincy Williams as like a deep sleeper linebacker for IDP leagues. And, shout out to James Robinson, because he looked really good. And unfortunately, he got cut, which was sad. But besides the run, the highlight that I think everybody saw where he was carrying those 3 guys on his back, he also had one where he actually like made a nice jump cut and just like straight juked a guy and ran for 15 yards. So that was also nice to see. Moving along, Bengals 19, Commanders 21. Andre Iosivas is a nice deep dynasty stash. I have him on one of my dynasty rosters. I'm feeling pretty positive about that. He's looked great. Number 2, Chase Brown is the backup, but only by default. He had kind of like an ugly game. And it's just like, it could end up being like Chris Evans or Trayvon Williams. Like, they could end up bringing someone in. It wouldn't even completely shock me if Leonard Fournette somehow ended up there. I'm not that in on Chase Brown, to be perfectly honest. He's I will say though, he does have like some pass catching ability. Though, granted, the 2 screens that he caught, he went for negative yardage, and he was like immediately plowed in the backfield. So it was not a great game for him. And then on the other flip side, you look at Chris Rodriguez, had 7 carries for 52 yards, averaged 7.4 per carry. I like that. What I like about that is I think it bodes well for the starting running backs in Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson. And both of their ADPs are so low that, in fact, I took both of them in my home league in my draft last night because I got them. Again, it was double-digit rounds. I believe I would have to double-check, but I believe it was 11th, 12th round in a 12-man league. If not, it was 10-11. One of those. But it was for sure double digits. So I was very happy about just being like, oh, I can just have a whole backfield here. And Eric Bieniemy is the offensive coordinator, and I expect them to be like a decent running team. Good. So kind of be able to see how it shakes out. If maybe one or the other ends up getting like a larger split, maybe I'll be able to part with the other one. But for now, when you get down again to those late rounds, it's like, oh, well, I can just have a backfield for free. Okay, fine. And then the next game was Ravens-Buccaneers. Ravens lost again. So that preseason loss hit hard. But honestly, it's because they played third stringers and they were just they were like, oh, we lost that amazing preseason streak. Okay, well, let's just literally put in like the backups to the backups. So the whole thing, my whole list here is for the Bucs. They're just in big trouble. Despite the score, the defense just looks lackadaisical. There was a Laquan Treadwell touchdown from Anthony Brown where there were like 3 Bucs, and this was like early in the earlier half of the game. And there's 3 Bucs defenders around him just looking clueless, and he just walks into the red zone. Cade Otton had a rare tight end handoff for a first down. That was kind of cool, but not exactly what I want to see from the offense, and not exactly how I want to see him used. And then Baker Mayfield to Chris Godwin had a nice touchdown. That is a good sight for fantasy, at least. So Baker Mayfield, I'm not in on, but Chris Godwin and Mike Evans are starting to feel a little bit safer. Chris Godwin more so. I see Mike Evans still as like a very boom or bust option, but he's definitely going to have his weeks. I think at this point, I'm confident that Mike Evans will have his 1,000-yard season to keep the streak alive. Next, Dolphins, Jaguars. Dolphins 18, Jaguars 31. Tank Bigsby fumbled at the end zone, so it's over. Tank Bigsby sucks now, and we can't draft him. No, it was like, again, the overreaction to like these backup running backs and especially rookies doing well in the preseason. Like, can we just calm down a little bit? Travis Etienne is still very much the starter. He always was. He got a goal line carry just to kind of almost prove everybody wrong of like, oh, we can put Travis Etienne at the goal line too if we really want. So that was funny to me, but I still love Tank Bigsby. I think he's a value in those double-digit rounds. I'm just in on both of them. You know, it's possible to just be in on the idea that Travis Etienne is a starting running back and a viable fantasy asset, but he can get hurt. That is a potential with all running backs, but I think we've kind of seen he was a little bit nicked up last year. He was hurt his rookie season. So when you've kind of seen that, it's like, well, if I could get a free handcuff that has shown out in the preseason, before that fumble, but who's looks like a viable NFL running back and could get some run even maybe as a flex play, like in double-digit rounds. I don't hate doing that either, but that doesn't mean I'm out on Travis Etienne. Like, sometimes there's a very black and white view of these fantasy situations that actually exist in a version of gray. If you just choose to acknowledge that it's possible for Travis Etienne and Tank Bigsby to both have relatively nice seasons based on where they're being drafted. So for Travis Etienne, that would be, I could perceive him as having 1,200 all-purpose yards and between 8 to 10 touchdowns, and the rest going to Tank Bigsby. The other thing I wanted to talk about here was that Tua is rising up my draft board. At this point, like, I have the elite quarterbacks of Mahomes, Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Justin Herbert, Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Trevor Lawrence, and then Tua. Like, I have him ahead of Deshaun Watson. I have him ahead of Kirk Cousins. I have him ahead of Dak Prescott. Obviously, it's barring injury, but that's like, you could say that about any NFL player. And yes, it's a little comical that he's like showing off his jiu-jitsu rolls to protect himself. But if he's legitimately able to roll in such a way or take falls in such a way where he is able to protect his head, where he's able to avoid potential injury, he obviously has Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, two superstar wide receivers. They have a plethora of running backs, which is the other problem that I'll talk about in a second. And, I just think that Tua's going to have a nice season and he's going to have some good games. So I at this point, I'm kind of in on Tua, and he's just going at like a nice value in terms of his ADP. So I think I've gotten kind of used to like, okay, well, and in Superflex too, I don't mind taking a little bit of an earlier shot on him. In Superflex, he does tend to go still kind of second or third round, but in single quarterback, if you're going to do the thing where you're going to pair like an Anthony Richardson type, or you want to get one of those rookie quarterbacks, like I would also probably like take Tua. And then, so I was just saying the running backs. I loved Devon Achane at the beginning of the season. This is my little memorial moment for Devon Achane, because at this point, I can admit early, I don't see it happening for the 2023 season. Now, if Jonathan Taylor does not make his way there, if he's not traded there, the window is still open, but it's greasy, because at this point it's a muddled backfield without Jonathan Taylor. You're talking about Raheem Mostert, Jeff Wilson, Myles Gaskin, and Salvon Ahmed. And I didn't see any of them show up on the cut list yet. So it remains to be seen. And if I had to guess, I would say it's Gaskin is probably on the outside looking in. But he's actually looked okay in the preseason. I think Salvon Ahmed. So that's the problem, is every time I look up and I see a little guy making a play and I'm like, ooh, is that Devon Achane? No, it's Salvon Ahmed. So that's a very frustrating aspect of being an Achane owner. And, I love the speed, but the size was always a concern. I think he is a little bit nicked up because of the WWE takedown that he suffered last week. So I'm just, at this point, I have stopped drafting Devon Achane, and I probably will just stick to that, because at this point, I don't know who's going to emerge from that backfield. And Devon Achane was always a little bit rich with the ADP, because he was actually going around like round 9, 10, along viable starters. But I was like, oh, Tyreek Hill speed in a running back, and I could see him with that muddled backfield being what it is, ascending to the top of the depth chart by the end of the year. But now with the if Jonathan Taylor lands there, it's dead. It's dead in the water. The window is closed. Paint it black. Put the curtain down. It's over for this year. Like, it's done. And honestly, if Jonathan Taylor's traded there and they sign him for any extended time, like, it's over for like at least the time, those first like 2 to 3 years. Like, it's a wasted pick in redraft, and in Dynasty you're just going to be sitting on it and probably not accumulate much value, sadly. So unfortunately, as much as I love Devon Achane, like at this point I would have to, advise being out on him. And then just again, quickly, last couple games here. Rams, Broncos. Rams were shut out in this one. Stetson Bennett just imploded. He went 4 for 9, 14 yards and 2 interceptions. Albert, oh baby, man, Albert O has Greg Dulcich owners worried because he showed out in the preseason, and I could see that happening literally any game where you're hoping it's Dulcich, and Dulcich will have his moments. I'm not saying that he's. Again, this is one of those things where it's like two truths can exist at the same time, where Albert O can, be a viable tight end, and so can Greg Dulcich. But the fact that they're having to coexist on the same team, unfortunately, means that they're going to eat into each other's opportunities and therefore fantasy points and production. And then deep stash. Jaleel McLaughlin. He's looked really good this preseason. And, I love Javonte Williams. And I'm so glad that he's like a miracle of science, because to me was like, there's no way he plays before week 8, honestly, like in any capacity. And then even then I thought like he would have to be worked in. And based on the original timeline and from what I've, been able to gather from trusted sources, it's the fantasy doctors. That's the trusted sources. Follow them on Twitter. If you don't follow them on Twitter. Anyways, bottom line, the original timeline, like legitimately, he shouldn't have been ready by now. It's crazy that he is. So if, God forbid, anything were to happen, Samaje Perine is not going to lock down the entire backfield by himself. And so at that point, Jaleel McLaughlin, I could see him having a role and stepping in and maybe even taking over by the end of the year. But that is very much like, a deep dynasty size. You got to be in 16 teams or more. So, for example, I have it's called Death Row Dynasty. It's a 16-team league with very deep rosters. That league I would go check if I was able to get Jaleel McLaughlin on my roster. And to tell you just how deep and competitive that one was, no, he was already taken. And for a while too. Like it wasn't like, oh, the preseason game happened and someone picked him. No. He was owned. Like literally the moment the rookie draft ended, everyone went and picked up like every possible rookie free agent that exists under the sun and has them stashed on rosters. So if you're in one of those kind of leagues, Jaleel McLaughlin is a nice little deep stash. Texans, Saints, Texans 17, Saints 13. So CJ Stroud is nice to see. He looked a lot better. He hit that touchdown to Nico Collins. All of the rookie quarterbacks looked better, so that was good to see. Dameon Pierce usage is for real, and he is rising up draft boards. And you know what? I don't hate it. I'm willing to take him basically. Now, if he goes as high as the 3rd round and I'm picking between him and Najee Harris, no, I'm taking my guy. But I liked him a lot as a 5th, 6th round pick. I thought that was like perfect value on him. So if you're in home leagues that are a little slow to adapt, because that's, the time of year that we're in, a lot of those drafts are around the corner. If he's still going in the 4th or 5th round, then I would be willing to take the shot on him there. And then finally here, Jameis Winston. I love him. He's hilarious, but he's firmly entrenched as the backup in my estimation because it's like, again, he's still very much Jameis Winston, where it's like he has a good play, he has a bad play. He has a great play, he has a horrible play. He sings songs that remind him of the good times. He sings songs that remind him of the best times. Next up, Raiders Cowboys. This is the last one, thank God. Raiders 16, Cowboys 31. So, I mean, the obvious thing that we have to talk about is Trey Lance. So we're going to actually flip the script here because I'll talk about that last because I have more to say on that than obviously the other two. The first thing I want to talk about is just a shout out to the Raiders side of it with Christian Wilkinson. Had an amazing preseason game, maybe got himself a spot on the roster. He had 13 targets, 10 for 120, had caught 10 balls for 122 yards, sorry. And then Aiden O'Connell has shown out this preseason. And I was kind of out on the Raiders because I was like, oh, God, if Jimmy G were to get hurt or anything, like that could be just a dead zone. But I don't think that anymore. And it's because Aiden O'Connell, like, granted, it's just a preseason, but man, when you do it 3 preseason games in a row, it starts to be like, okay, well, maybe he's got something. He went 17 for 26 for 178 yards. So the Raiders may have like accidentally hit on a viable backup quarterback that could become their starter. And it's like they have Jimmy G as a placeholder. We could see Aiden O'Connell take over this franchise next year. I guess it's really, I feel like that's really dependent on how they do though with their record, right? Because if they tank, if they do end up being really bad and they have the ability to draft a very high-end quarterback, I think they will. But if for some reason they were to win games and they don't have really like the ability to trade up, I could see a world and a path where maybe Aiden O'Connell actually becomes like the starter. And again, it's not saying he's like going to be a franchise guy or anything, but I could see him being like a viable starter based on what I've seen from this preseason. He's outperformed a litany of not just rookie quarterbacks, but veterans as well. So now we got to get into the Trey Lance thing. Before I get into the Trey Lance thing, this clip's a little bit long. It's from the Dak press conference. I think a lot of people have seen it already, but I want to play his full answer because I've seen it get clipped off. His full answer was actually about just under a minute long. So here it is. And this was to the question of basically the reporter said, that Jerry Jones didn't advise him ahead of time of the trade, and was that something that he expected?
Randy said he didn't tell you. Would you expect a heads up?
I mean, I can't say that I necessarily expected it, no. I understand that that's business. I understand that they're probably on a timeline. They need to get something done. And as I said, he felt like that strengthened his team. And, as I said, ready to welcome him. And, we knowing the strength of the quarterback room that we have, honestly right now, I mean, my heart and my mind's with Will. And so it's a tough situation, honestly. Love that guy to death over there, plays his ass off, comes in, prepares the right way each and every day. And, as I said, we're gonna welcome Trey, and that's what you do for a teammate. I mean, we're excited. I'm excited. I'm always there to help somebody, help a teammate. Very selfless person, so that's not going to change by any means. But my heart's with that guy over there right now.
So I know that it's not a perfect example. And look, in life, there aren't always perfect examples. But to me, the hypocrisy of, especially like the Cowboys, with everything that happened with like the Terrell Owens situation, and again, just like this whole mantra that we hear from the NFL of like, oh, we don't want our players to be distractions. We don't want our players to be distractions. We don't want distractions in the locker room. We don't want distractions. But then you have 2 viable backup quarterbacks. Cooper Rush won games last year. Regardless what anyone says, he won games for you last year. He showed that he could be a viable backup. And then on top of that, you have Will Grier, who he's been in the league 5 years. This is now his third year on your team. You've had the ability to develop him since he joined your team off waivers in 2021. You give him the chance of like, oh, well, we're going to give you this whole game so that you can kind of prove yourself. Almost kind of like, it's almost like they would do that to be like, oh, well, he's going to fall on his face in a sense of like, he'll have an okay game. You know, maybe he goes like 15 for 30 and throws a couple hundred yards. No. Will Grier took that moment, and yes, it was the preseason. Yes, it was against backup players, but man, I don't know a lot of NFL quarterbacks that are going into a preseason game right now, going 29 for 35 for 305 touchdowns, or 305 touchdowns. That would be hilarious. 305 yards and 2 touchdowns. And then on top of that, he ran the ball 10 times for 53 yards and had 2 more scores on the ground. So he had 29 of 35 passing and 4 touchdowns. This was your third string quarterback that was absolutely causing no drama, was basically unheard of and unheard from. And so Jerry Jones decides to take it upon himself to trade a 4th round pick for Trey Lance, who clearly is right in the middle of a media circus in San Francisco with everything going on with the fact that they traded up for him and now he's basically the 3rd string quarterback on their squad, and they have him on the trade block. And so there's all this stuff swirling, and you're like, oh, well, I've got this quiet quarterback room. I've got a viable starter that I can't get rid of, and I've got 2 decent backups that cause no drama, that are, you know, discounts to my team ultimately. And so it's not like that. It's like he's saving money with the rookie contract, right? Because it's not like Will Grier or, you know, Cooper Rush are like commanding. I don't think their contracts would even be that much more than like a 1st round rookie's contract would be, considering, because like they redid it with the CBA negotiations last time, I feel like, right? So it's like I don't understand the move for the Cowboys. And it's like, especially again, when it's like, oh, well, you were the ones that shipped out Terrell Owens, right or wrong, for being a distraction. And again, it's this whole mantra that we get from like NFL higher ups that it's like, oh, we don't want distractions. But it's like, but when you just decide to make a distraction for no reason, it's like, we're not supposed to like comment or look at it from like that side of it. It's like, I understand totally like the player side of feeling like, yeah, business is business, but it's like at the end of the day, like you can choose to do business in a certain way. You can choose to do business with integrity, or you can choose to be hypocritical and basically just like, you know, not go back on your word and just like be kind of a shitty person. And if that doesn't necessarily prevent you from being successful, but it, you know, it's maybe that's just not the way that I want to go through life. And that's not the kind of people that I personally would want to surround myself with. Unfortunately, you know, a lot of, I think that's like a known thing that like CEOs and like extremely driven people like that are like in extremely high up positions like that almost get to that point because you almost have to have like psychopathic tendencies to be able to even like manage, you know, the cutthroat nature of like being able to get to the top. So it's like, I don't know. Me personally, I'm not someone who's like motivated by even like money or standard things. Like to me, I prioritize like my mental health and my happiness and my family over, you know, anything in terms of like material gain. So it's like, again, it's a whole kind of sidetrack and just rant about like, I hate just like, again, I hate hypocrisy when it comes from a place of power, and especially when they're trying to convey it to you of like, oh, you owe us a thing, almost like it's like, no, like, again, just this whole idea of like, well, we don't want distractions, but we're going to trade for Trey Lance while, there's a complete media circus around him. And just to prove the point, it's like, so now you've got First Take, Undisputed, and every other major network and show doing segments on Cowboys traded for Trey Lance. Is Dak Prescott done? And you've got Dak Prescott having to answer questions in the press conferences. For Christ's sakes, Jimmy G had to answer questions about Trey Lance and had to be like, yeah, well, I hope he's successful, kind of thing. Like, it's patently ridiculous to me. And I think it was a bad move for the Cowboys. And to me, it's just another reason that I'm out, like, from a fantasy perspective on like the whole team, because I don't like the coaching staff. You had Mike McCarthy saying something as insanely ludicrous as, oh, well, Kellen Moore was just only focused on scoring points. It's like, what do you mean? It's like the whole point is you need to score more points than the other team. That's how you win the game, Mike McCarthy. Like, oh, he was only focused on the part that wins. Yeah. I like to focus on, fiddling my thumbs and winding the play clock down and wasting time. Like, get out of here. So done with this. Like, and just, I get it, Cowboys fans. You got to root for your team. You got to defend your people. But it's like, man, if I was a Cowboys fan, I would just be like, look, I'm taking a break on this year. I'm kind of just out until they fire Mike McCarthy, because this is clearly not working out. He's not. The whole point was that you needed someone to get you over the hump to get to the Super Bowl, to make a Super Bowl run, because the team is supposedly set up for that, which I don't see it, because besides, like, you have CeeDee Lamb, and then Brandon Cooks is a nice player, and then Michael Gallup is maybe a thing. And then what else? Jalen Tolbert. And then in the backfield, it's like Tony Pollard. And then I love Deuce Vaughn as much as the next person, but he literally looks, minuscule out there. And then it's Malik Davis. So it's like, I don't actually see like a ton of depth per se on the team. I feel like it's CeeDee Lamb, it's Tony Pollard, and it's kind of a mishmash of those other guys afterwards. So, and again, it's like Dak Prescott struggled last year, and now you're putting him through all this stuff with the Trey Lance stuff. Did he really need this mentally even? Like, is this like a message from Jerry Jones? Like, what kind of head games are we trying to play with our starting quarterback here? Like, what's the point of this? What was the point? And they're like, and again, immediately on to, they get a chance to see if Trey Lance. No. This move is weaker than Trey Lance's hairline. Apologies to Trey Lance, okay? I'm sure he's a great player. I'm sure he's a fine, upstanding human being. You, sir, needed to be traded to another team, one where you actually had a shot of being the starter, where you actually had a shot of developing behind like a veteran quarterback. Honestly, like the Saints would have been better off trading for Trey Lance, even though they already have Jameis Winston. It's just very frustrating, but I want to end things on a good note here. I was kind of going through some stuff. If you're a wrestling fan, you know what it was. I'm not going to get into it here. But the bottom line is I missed my Hard Knocks recap. So I'm going to just quickly go through the Hard Knocks recap because it was funny to me, because even though we got like a whole second half of the episode, which was like the preseason game, which is always cool to see, like the behind the scenes of the preseason game, the main attraction happened right in the middle of the show and just completely shut it down. And that's how we're going to shut down this show. So we'll start with the Dalvin Cook signing. they kind of touched on that. And then we got to see Brees Hall's rehab and how his process has been through working back through the preseason. And there was a moment between Nathaniel Hackett and Brees Hall. And this is where I'm like, I understand to a degree why Nathaniel Hackett failed as a head coach, because there's certain people that I think they're really funny, you know what I mean? But then like it's like Michael Scott syndrome of like in their mind, like they're hilarious and they've got like these awesome jokes, and then like when they try to deliver it, like it kind of doesn't work, and the people are like, huh? And so it's like you're just like, it's like he's like Michael Scott out there, where like he's Brees Hall's like trying to like take a snap and like or like do a rep or something, and he's like, oh hi, I'm Nathaniel Hackett, I'm the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets, it's nice to meet you. He's like doing a whole bit, and Brees Hall's like ignoring him, and then he kind of comes back around, and then he kind of walks up to Brees and like shakes his hand. He's like, oh, just again, I'm Nathaniel Hackett, the coordinator, nice to meet you. It's like, I don't know what the hell this joke was in his mind that he thought was so funny. Brees Hall clearly had no idea what the fuck was going on. So it was just like, that was a moment where I was like, if he was doing that shit to like all the Denver Broncos, I could understand why they were just like, who is this Jamoke making these weird jokes? Like, you're supposed to be the head coach, man. Like, so again, it's just like, I think there's certain guys that are just better fits as offensive coordinators or coordinators in general. I think Hackett kind of fits that role where it's like you don't necessarily want him to be like the main speaking voice representative for your team. Robert Saleh handles the speeches really well, and that's kind of, you need a speech coach almost in the NFL. It's like and it's like the guys who kind of have like these like, it's like the Jameis Winston thing of like, when to eat a W. When you get those like awkward, it's hard for people to buy into you when you can't deliver a promo. You know, some of these guys just need to go watch some WWE wrestling and study up on their promo game. So after that, Woody Johnson came out with the drip, as the kids would say, with the ice. He had this awesome chain. It was like this big chain that said Woody, which I thought was really funny. And then like I said earlier, Quinnen Williams and Quincy Williams, man, they just look really great. Quinnen Williams especially is like the obvious leader of the team, but he had this also hilarious quote where he kept being like, Mike Evans called me fat. And he really like took it to heart. He's like, I've been trying to lose weight all summer. Why would you say that, bro? And everyone's like, because like you're a defensive tackle, you're 300 pounds. It's like you're kind of built that way, but at the same time, like, he looks good for a man of his size and stature, and I think he looks fantastic. Shout out to you, Mr. Quinnen Williams. I hope you get 23 sacks this year. Help my IDP teams. Garrett Wilson to the moon. That's obvious at this point to everyone from what we saw in the preseason. But even, if you just watch Hard Knocks, Mark Sanchez and Braylon Edwards were visiting camp, and Braylon Edwards asked Aaron Rodgers about Garrett Wilson, and immediately he just like in one word, special. Like that was the first thing he said, special. And then he like elaborated and said a bunch of stuff. But like it was so like it was like literally he's like, oh, what about the kid 17 special? Yeah. So Garrett Wilson is he's gonna have a fantastic season. And then Allen Lazard and Randall Cobb, those are good real life signings. Allen Lazard is like potentially a good fantasy signing because he's younger and now he gets to kind of continue in sort of the same offense and with the same quarterback, but on a new team, which is not something that you see very often. So I think that's kind of cool. I could see Allen Lazard, especially out producing his ADP where he's going. And now that Corey Davis has retired, it entrenches him in my mind as like the secondary target where it's like Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, as like the two outside wide receivers, and then you have guys mixing in on the inside. And then Randall Cobb. So it's funny because it's like it kind of gets dragged through the media, and it's like it's so easy to forget the human side of football. And when you're watching Hard Knocks, I think that it's a stark reminder of like, oh yeah, these are human beings. And Aaron Rodgers has a relationship, a deep, meaningful, intimate relationship with Randall Cobb. He's the godfather to one of their children. Like they call him Uncle Aaron. So it's like having a guy like that in that building helps everybody. And it's like, to put it in a loose analogy, if you were a manager at a very successful business for a long time and you had to leave that business and then go to a new business and you're like, oh, I'm kind of, close to retiring. I got maybe 2 years where I can kind of try and turn your whole thing around here, see what I can do. And then I'll probably be on my way. It's like you could come in alone and try to individually do that all by yourself, try to individually go to each person and train them, or you could be like, hey, I have an excellent co-manager or supervisor that I want to bring with me, Nathaniel Hackett. I have a couple really great workers that have worked for me for a long time, and they know how I work. They kind of know my style. They know my lingo, and they can help accelerate the rest of the team and getting to know me and getting to know, where I want to take this place and the kind of plans I have and the kind of things that we instilled in our previous business. Some of that culture, they can instill that on like a worker level where they're right in the trenches with those guys. And so you get that from Randall Cobb and even Allen Lazard, but Randall Cobb especially, and it's like there's a moment where Garrett Wilson says, Randall Cobb is translating Aaron Rodgers for me. So when Aaron Rodgers is calling plays, going through cadence, is doing stuff in the offense, and Garrett Wilson is not totally sure what it is, there's sometimes like it's like a human behavior where it's like it can be hard. Some people are very brazen, like myself, where it's like I will ask you a million questions and I'm not shy and I don't care if like, and I'll be like, I know you're kind of getting annoyed, but I need to ask all these questions so that I can learn and perform to maximum ability. Not everyone is extroverted in that way. And so for him to have like a veteran and someone who's at his position, someone who's literally like in the trenches with them, where it's like he's going through his individual workouts. So it's like even in those in going through individual drills, the wide receiver drills, he's going to be with Randall Cobb. And Randall, when you can pick the brain of Randall Cobb and be like, hey, what's Aaron like? What Aaron do this? Aaron does that. It's like, or even just being like, hey, Aaron said this. Kind of what does that mean? It's going to advance the learning to a degree that just that alone was worth signing Randall Cobb to the minimal 1-year contract that he's on. So it's like, I'm not saying like, oh, Randall Cobb's this amazing fantasy signing, but I think sometimes that gets lost in the sauce. I think it's easy as fantasy players too to be like stats and numbers and overlook again the human aspect of football and be like, look, Randall Cobb has a positive contribution on this team that is beyond numbers, that is immeasurable. You cannot chart it, okay? But it's probably more important than if he himself was able to get 1,000 yards, to be perfectly honest. If he can help Garrett Wilson truly ascend to being a superstar, that's more valuable to this team than if Randall Cobb at his age now in his like 11th season or whatever it is able to get 1,000 yards out of himself. If you can elevate the younger receivers around you, almost like a coach on the field, God, that aspect is just too often overlooked. And especially I feel like in the fantasy community where it's like always like got to be young, got to get young, got to trade young. It's like actually you can get production and viability from veteran players. You just kind of got to know how to manage those players. So again, you're not always going to have them for a whole year. Sometimes you know that certain players have, like for the last 5 years, started slow and ended fast. So don't draft them, but trade for them after they struggle for 4 weeks, kind of thing. Like, or there's always guys that you're like, oh, every year this guy starts fast, has a good season, and gets hurt or blah blah. Whatever it is, like you can if you can see it coming down the road, you can adjust and take advantage of the windows when they are producing. And that's often better to collectively patch that together on a season. Because if you were to take that thread as like one fantasy player, because essentially it's one spot on your roster, as you're, adding guys from the waiver wire or making trades or whatever it is, like you're threading together a viable starter through the whole year, as opposed to like, oh, I took a shot on, Cedric Tillman or Donovan Peoples-Jones or something like that, or like Van Jefferson or Xavier Hutchinson. I took a very late shot on one of these guys that ultimately like didn't play or didn't produce or didn't do anything. It's like, and I'm not saying none of the names I just said are necessarily that I'm saying that they're going to not produce, but they're just, going very late in drafts where generally speaking, it's like when I'm picking a guy like, like an Adam Thielen, like I had mentioned much earlier on the show, it's like the difference between like Adam Thielen and like Robert Woods, or like well, that's another veteran, but like as much as I love Jalen Hyatt, it's like Jalen Hyatt could be everything and could be nothing. if he turns out to be nothing, it's like, oh well, I could have had Adam Thielen and just had that solid production, and ultimately traded for something else or dropped him at a certain point. And it's like you got to be able to balance. And I always say, like, you want to have balance in your life and in your fantasy. So it's like, don't just take like all rookie shots or upside shots at the end. You want to parse in a couple of these like veteran producers where it's like, that they're going to be consistent. And so it's like, again, this is getting away from like the whole thing of like how the veterans can affect a team on a deeper level than just the stats. But it's like, that can also play into the numbers where it's like, as I had mentioned, again, going back to the same example of Adam Thielen, it's like because of that veteran presence, the rookie quarterback is leaning on him more. If Aaron Rodgers might lean on Randall Cobb and Alan Lazard a little more than we even expect, because it's his first year with the New York Jets. And so you tend to look for familiar targets, when you're under duress, which NFL quarterbacks tend to be under duress a lot. That's kind of like the point of the game. So we'll just wrap up here because we're running a little bit long. Randall Cobb announced his pregnancy, so that was really cool. Him and his wife announced that they're having another baby, so that was awesome. And then speaking of kids, Robert Saleh's kid was throwing the ball around with Aaron freaking Rodgers, which was a cool moment. But then also, I didn't know Robert Saleh had 7 kids, because he was talking to Damian Woody, former offensive lineman for the Jets, and Damian Woody also has 7 kids. So that between the two of them, they got almost enough for a scrimmage. It's crazy. And then a couple quotes that I really enjoyed. Robert Saleh, this kid has no idea how lucky he is, which was in reference to passing the ball around with Aaron Rodgers, which is crazy. And then the other one was they brought up Tanzel Smart's quote from the first episode because it was that funny when he said, I can't wait to go eat a coochie board. You meant charcuterie, but yeah, coochie board. I always call it shark coochie anyways, but I think I might just shorten it to coochie board from now on. And then, man, like I said, right in the middle of the show, but for us, it's going to be the end here. I'm going to leave you with rookie wide receiver Jerome Cap. They did the rookie show again because it was so bad on the last episode that they made them run it back, and it was funny because I'm forgetting his name now, but I think it's Kuntz. His last name is Zach Kuntz. Maybe is his name. The tight end and the two offensive line rookies still don't have a clue. Like, read a room, guys. Like, one of them played some random song. I think maybe like a quarter of the room was into it, and then the next two were trying to play the Backstreet Boys, and it's like, again, read the room, guys. Like, maybe in like your day-to-day life or like in a classroom setting, like that might be funny. NFL locker room, you gotta get a little grittier, my guy. So, and then just to prove the point, Jerome Cap, he recapped in the biggest way with the 8 Mile diss track. And like I said, we are going to go out on this. So thank you so much for watching. I super appreciate you. Please like, subscribe, share the show. It's my first year doing content creation. I'm super, super excited and stoked for the regular season. And I'm also stoked, like I had mentioned at the beginning, for fantasyfootballadvice.network. The glow up is official. It's real. It happened. Make sure you go check it out. They got the dark theme, just like Sleeper, so it looks awesome. It runs clean. You can get in right now for free to be able to just like preview and check it out. And then if you decide to join, you can go ahead and sign up. Thank you again for watching. Catch you all on the flip side.
Good sound, and I didn't get a signing bonus. So everybody from the 313, put your motherfucking hands up and follow me. Everybody from the 313, put your motherfucking hands up. Look, I'm Wally Santo. Notice that this man did not have his hands up. Free will got you gas up. And who's afraid of the big bad wolf? 1, 2, 3 into the floor. 1 pop, 2 pop, 3 pop, 4 pop, 3 pop, 2 pop, 1. Your pop, he's pop, your pop. Nice. See? I know everything he's got to say against me. I am white. I am a fucking bum. I do live in a trailer with my mom. Yeah.